Hello and welcome to another Glyph screencast for YSDN 3003 typeface design. This screencast is going to be on the technique of kerning. So we will have talked about kerning theory in class, and this is going to be just a screencast that talks about how we can go about applying kerning in the Glyphs app. Now, I have a version, of course, this is the file of source serif we've been working on. I'm only going to kern in the serif file for now, just because I have more characters built for it. And I'm not going to, and it's really just for demonstration because unlike where with fitting, a serif and a sans serif required a different approach, with kerning, more or less the same kind of technical approach is going to be applied for a sans or a serif. The values will be different, but the theoretical approach is basically the same in terms of technique. So I've got the file open where we've got some fitting, but I also have a file where I have kerning. This one has no kerning in it at all. And the way that you can look at the kerning in your font is if you go to Window, Kerning. And what you see in here is a blank palette, and that's because we have 0 kerning pairs. Remember, the theory of kerning is that we're actually creating pairings of glyphs to solve a problem. So we don't want to kern our entire typeface and rely on that, because kerning is something that gets dropped pretty quickly in the line layout engines of a lot of apps, or the way that a lot of apps will, hook into the line layout engine of a Mac OS or a Windows. Kerning is something that is not guaranteed to always be there in every environment. So our fitting should be really well done because that is a guarantee that has to be there. However, kerning is something we can use as a problem-solving technique, and I'll show you the kind of situations where it would be used, and it would work particularly well. But what I want to show you, though, is a font that actually has kerning pairs. So this font has kerning pairs, and you'll notice the way that Glyphs orders the kerning pairs. It'll show you the glyph that is the main glyph. Let's say this is the glyph that is being kerned with a character on the right-hand side of it right now. And glyphs tends to go the glyph and then what's being kerned with it on its right-hand side, because then you can satisfy, of course, what happens to that glyph, the A in relation, the A small cap in relation to the R small cap, A on its left to the R on its right. But notice in this one there are 5,646 pairs. That's got a lot to do with the fact that there is Greek and Cyrillic in this font and many other characters combinations that need to be taken care of. So that's what kerning pairs look like in terms of a fully fledged font, but really you should try to have the least amount of kerning pairs as you can possibly have. But your kerning tends to happen a lot more in the capital letters. There are lowercase situations where kerning is going to be necessary. However, a lot of the situations happen in, as we saw in the class, where you get words like this, or a capital letter to a lowercase letter. These are problematic. Stuff like this, where if I take, let's make sure that these are relatively fit, and I'm going to say that this is kind of the fitting for the P. Should probably actually have less than that. In this typeface, this problem's not so bad, but the T would probably be something like this. That's still an issue in here. Another problem is this. So if I fit this really quickly, this is always kind of going to cause problems. Other issues that need to be kerned very often are things like this. And this is going to look funny because I haven't really kerned this very well. But a word like this, a word like bolt or belt, this might not have to be kerned depending on how you design the typeface, but usually that has to be kerned. LT combination. Also, words like this, or combinations like this. And notice how I have not fit these, so let's give these a 0 value, because this will be a good demonstration. And let's give it the H at the moment. And Okay, so what you see going on here, actually papaya is a crazy word because it needs a kern between the P and the A. Notice once again with that theory of kerning, the two glyph boundaries are butting together, and the idea with kerning is I'm going to overlap these boxes. Now the way that kerning works when I apply it in glyphs is that I'm sitting here within a kerning pairing context, and technically what I'm saying now is the left-hand side of A, I want it to kern with the right-hand side of P. This is a very isolated instance. So to do that, what I do is I'm in the A glyph, I go to kern, and I say, let's say negative 100. And that kerns it in. That's way more than I should have. I'm going to dial it back. It shouldn't even be that much. Or even that much for that matter. Okay, so there's a kern. And when you see a kerning pair, when you have a kerning pair, you'll actually see it floating down here underneath these glyph boundaries. Notice how these glyphs have these side-bearing values here, and it also tells me that this is a kern right here, this blue zone. I'm actually overlapping these boxes. That's what that's telling me. See that? Negative 30 overlap. This is a 0 side-bearing. See that? That A is overlapped inside there. That's what's actually happening. That's the kind of instruction I'm giving. So with the Y in the A, what I'm saying is kern right side of A with the left side of Y. And let's try this. Once again, way too tight. This is a pretty square kind of typeface, very vertical, so I don't need to kern it quite so crazily. And see what's happening? I'm building kerning pairs up here. I'm going to take the Y now and I'm going to kern it on this side, and it probably won't be the same value because they're thin. It probably needs to be more. Yeah, that doesn't look great. But I'm starting to build combos now. Same thing with this situation, A and V. They have nowhere to go. They have to be kerned. So the V and the A, I have to give them a kerning value. And they have to be a bit more than that. And let's try, this should be probably a little bit more because they're two thin strokes coming together. Okay. This N should be fit in a way that it works well with these A's, but we didn't do that yet. But the same thing is going to happen now with capital letters like T, F, and lowercase letters that follow it. I need to kern them. So I'm kerning the right side of T with this lowercase o, but I also have to do it with all the other lowercase letters that might come, like this, like this. Lots of names here. Okay. So I would give this a value of, let's say, 40. It's probably, I think that's too tight. So let's give it a value of 20, actually 25, no, 30. And how does it look down here? It actually looks too far away. Okay, 40 was better. This doesn't need a kerning pair because it works fine on its own. You might even push it a little bit away. I would try not to have positive kerning values though. It might look better, but I would try to fit it so that you don't need that. But notice now how the E, it needs to have that same kerning value. But the E got put into that grouping. The A also needs a similar kerning value. I'll try the, I can look up here and say, okay, so that needs to have that. 40, I'll try negative 40. Yeah. And if you see something here like this I did give it a kerning value, but I'm actually going to delete it. I don't want a kerning pair there. It's confusing. And so I would go through a sequence like that. Same thing with F. Same thing with, with P. You would need to have P for some words like pin or pair. You need to have kerning values for this one too. Not so much for this one. In fact, I think that the I is fit. This is telling us something about our I fitting too tight together, if this is what's happening. Or the fitting of our T and our P are too close together. Actually, I shouldn't do that. Okay. Okay. Now, when you're testing your kerning, you do it the same way as you would do here. You would actually put it into strings in here and say, okay, this is working, it's not. Same situation. You're just building up a text, really, seeing how it works together. Okay, that's everything for this video.